What's going on, everybody? It's Itashwa Watkins, your favorite realtor. And like I always do, I like to bring people that add benefits to your home buying process, not just teach you what to do when you're going out and buy the home. So today, I have someone who's going to help you pre-prepared and discuss a little bit about trust and what's some of the benefits about trust and everything like that. So welcome, Ulrica. How's everything going?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from originally? How did you get started and everything like that?
I'm from the Bronx.
Okay.
Born and raised in the Bronx.
DX 169th Prospect
Oh,
Avenue.
wow.
What? And I went to Cardinal Hayes. Enough about me, but I'm sorry.
I went to Walton.
Oh, cool.
Well, school inside of Walton, but
Nice.
story. But yes, I grew up in the Bronx. My family's originally from Antigua.
Cool. Antigua and massive.
Yes, indeed. With Dadley Massive.
What's good? Yes.
I grew up in the Bronx, and I went to high school, all of that in the Bronx, and then eventually I went away to Binghamton for college. And the people that I met in college, kind of led me into this career of being an attorney.
Awesome.
The experiences that I had, eventually I decided I want to go to law school.
Okay.
And had some trouble, finding my path, deciding exactly what I wanted to do. I went in wanting to do one thing. I wanted to do family law, and then eventually realized it wasn't for me. But still wanting to help, I kind of found my way into this estate planning world.
Okay. So did you do some family law to begin with and then made the switch, or did you just like...
So I did family law in terms of my externships and internships while in law school.
Okay.
And so I kind of made the decision before finishing that I don't think that was going to be my path.
Got it.
So when I did come out, I didn't do law right away. I was more in the financial world for a little bit, and then I decided to make my way back.
Okay. So then there was that transition period before you... Like, I think like most people do once they get out of college, we go into college and we think that we're going to pursue this one career, and then life hits us in the face.
Absolutely.
And we go into a different direction. But I'm so happy that you were able to make it back into the law the law field. So did you go directly into doing trust, or how did that happen?
I did financial crimes and AML. Anti-money laundering. For I want to say about 3 or 4 years or so after law school, and then I eventually met up with she actually was a real estate attorney that was looking to expand her practice and doing estate planning, and I had the interest because this was one of my favorite classes in law school. Wills. I loved my Wills professor, so that also had an influence on me. So I got on board, joined her team, and learned a lot, and have been doing it for the last 5-6 years now.
Awesome. And then doing that, then you picked up the trust part of it, correct?
Yes. So the estate planning entails wills, trusts. And just planning for your future.
It's all part of it.
It's all part of it.
Got it. So, like, what's the primary benefit of a trust?
Okay. So, I guess take a step back first. What is a trust?
Yes, let's start there.
So you have part of the estate planning process includes preparing for your future. When you can't, manage your assets or things that you own on your own, who's going to be in charge, and then who gets it in the end. That's what your will and your trust do. The difference between your will and a trust is the process first of managing it while you're alive, and then how it's transferred to who you want it to go to once you pass.
Got it.
For a trust, it's sort of as creating an entity like an LLC or any other entity that you may have that is created to house these assets that you own, whether it be your businesses, your properties, your even vehicles. Sometimes we don't encourage people to put vehicles in a trust because of the liability. They depreciate all the time, things like that. So it's more of a liability to have a vehicle in your trust. But all the other assets that are controlled by this entity that you create, where you put someone in charge while you're alive, you can be the person that's in charge, and then you say, well, when I can't manage this anymore, I want to put my trustee, someone else that I trust.
Got it.
Managing it.
So what's the difference between that, or how do they play, if they play hand in hand between a trust and then power of attorney? How does that work?
So similar, your trustee and your power of attorney are individuals that can act on your behalf during your incapacity or when you've passed.
Okay.
The power of attorney is that it's just one document that gives someone the power to control or manage the things that you have access to. So whether it be running your business while you're incapacitated, or making financial decisions, selling some of your assets, they're given that control.
Okay.
Similar to your trustee. Your trustee, all the difference would be is that with the trustee, they're managing the things that are a part of this trust that you've created. This entity that you've moved your assets from being owned personally by you to being owned by this entity that you've created. The trustee has control over everything that's in there.
No worries. So, for example, I'm working with a client right now, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, because I keep on coming across things where I actually have two situations where I think a trust would have been beneficial. So, I'm working with a client right now. They're married, and the son is taking care of the mother and the father. The mom now has dementia, so the father is still coherent, but they own the property together, would put it in a trust. So now they have to go through legalities and everything like that, because she's not in her right sense to say, hey, we want to sell this property so we can actually move her to an assisted living home. So they're kind of stuck. Would a trust help with a situation like that?
So both the trust and the power of attorney would be something that's needed, because the decision to make because she's still alive, the decision to sell or move her that asset in any way would have to be governed by the power of attorney. Someone who's given that authority. If it was in a trust already, or had been put in a trust, the trustee has that control over it and wouldn't need any additional power to say what happens with it. But they're given specific directions with this trust as to what can happen with the property or the proceeds from a sale of the property.
Got it.
Whether or not that's supposed to be used for the grantors, that's the individuals who create the trust, or if it can, be distributed to the beneficiaries, the people who the trust are created for in the future.
Okay. So a situation like that where it's dispersed and she's still alive, do they have to put it aside until the parties have passed on, or can the money be allocated right away?
So that would depend on what the trust
The trust says.
So
Got it.
That is part of the instructions that are given when you're creating these trust documents as, okay, well, when I'm incapacitated, what happens with any funds that are controlled by the trust? For instance, an option would be the trustee's instructed to first take care of the grantors, the people who've created the trust. And then after them, anyone that's dependent on them. So if they have children, young children, or even other kind of dependents, the trustee does have the power to say, I can use some money to help an individual that is dependent on this grantor who's now incapacitated. They don't have the capacity they're not here. They don't have, they don't have proper sound mind.
Got it.
Of sound mind, sorry.
No, I got what you're saying. What you're saying.
Decisions.
Definitely,
So, yes.
definitely. Are they different types of trust, or is it just one kind of basic framework?
Glad that you asked. So yes, there are different types of trust. So your main two options of trust would be whether it's a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust, or irrevocable. People say
worries.
differently.
I get tongue-tied all the time.
I say irrevocable.
Okay.
But yeah, so the revocable is the option that gives you the person who's creating, so the grantor, well, remember that word, grantor or trustor, person who's creating the trust, it gives them the power to make changes. If they decide, I don't want this trust anymore, they can reallocate the assets that were put in that trust however they decide, and revoke the trust. They can cancel the trust there. The other option, the irrevocable trust, is sort of set in stone once it's created. That's the one that gives more protection, but it offers the grantor less control over what's put inside that trust.
Got it. And what do you usually see people typically go? Okay. Or it just depends on the individual? It
depends on the individual, and it's a balancing act. You have to weigh what is more important to you. Do you want to have control over whatever you put in there to say, you know what, I want to change my mind about who should get this, when they should get it, how they should get it, all these things that are listed in this trust.
Okay.
If you want control over that, then you would go the route of doing the revocable, because you reserve the right to amend, revoke, and take out, put back in assets, whatever you want to do. You reserve that right as a grantor with the revocable. The irrevocable, however, The benefit of that is that it gives more protection.
Got it.
Because what happens with the irrevocable trust, once you've put the assets in that trust, you no longer own it. It's not yours to say what happens with it. You create this trust document that says what should happen, but once you've put it in there, it's no longer under your control.
Okay.
Because you don't have any control over it, and it's no longer your asset. It's for the benefit of your beneficiaries.
Got it.
Creditors can't come for it.
Got
They can't
it.
come after you for it because you don't own it. It's not a part of your estate. It doesn't belong to you.
Got it. And this is good for the people who are planning to mess up their credit and everything like that. No, I'm just joking. But I can see the benefit. And I think that's one of the things people want to know about. What are some of the tax benefits, and like if there's any tax gains or anything like that, how does that work?
Got it. So we'll put out there, Uncle Sam's
Yes.
gonna go come for his money however he wants
Yeah,
it.
he's gonna get it no matter what.
Just so you know, it's not necessarily I want to avoid taxes, I'm gonna create a trust. It's not how it works. However, you can reduce or minimize the options of what you're paying, what taxes you are paying by setting up different types of trusts. So one of the taxes that we have to worry about when we die, Uncle Sam taxes us on the estate tax. That is a tax that you have to worry about.
It's a big one too.
Right now, I believe the exemption allowance is, I think it's 13 million for an individual, and the 28 for a couple. I believe that's what it is. It changes depending on who's in administration.
Does
So
it
you
change because in states as well, or it's just country?
so
Which one?
it's you have the state level, and then you
Okay.
have the federal level. The federal level is what governs that would be who's in administration, whether or not it gets
Okay.
Goes up, goes down. I've seen it fluctuate several times.
Okay.
But what that is the estate tax is that anything that you're gifting to any individual or that your estate owns that's supposed to be passed on you're exempt until that exemption allowance. So that 13 million, the first dollar amount over though, it's taxed at 40%.
Got it.
So,
got it.
And that's a hefty
Yeah,
tax.
it's a hefty tax. You kidding me? That's definitely a hefty tax.
So to reduce that, creating a trust, it minimizes how much your estate is paying, or if it's paying on a transfer to your loved ones. The trust avoids the probate process, so it doesn't whatever assets that you own at the time of your death, and they're not going through, your loved ones don't have to go through probate to receive them. Instead, the trust is saying, we've been controlling this, we're passing it on to these individuals that are listed as beneficiaries of this trust.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about what probate is?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. No, you're right. So if you have a will or if you die without a will, your assets are going through what's called probate before they go to your loved ones. It's the court process that says, okay, who owned what, how they owned it, and then who's supposed to get it now that you're gone.
Okay.
So you, between attorney fees, filing fees, court fees, you're looking at a good 5% of whatever your estate going to just paying to get whatever your loved one's paying that to get whatever you owned. Once probate is conducted, it's they assess how much the estate is valued at, where those things situated, and then who should get them. As I was saying, with the trust, it avoids you having to go through this process that could be lengthy, and some people are going through probate for months at a time before they are able to get access to their family, to money in a bank account, or the property that should be titled to transfer to this child or whoever, and so the trust avoids you having to go through that delayed process of getting the assets.
Got it. So that brings me into my next question. Like, everything has a cost. So what's the cost to actually start a trust? And then is there like maintenance fee that goes on with it as well? Or how does that work?
So depending on the type of trust that you have, in terms of maintaining it, the thing that you would have to be concerned about would be like whatever taxes are being paid on the assets, whether there's income tax, depending on the state that you live in, if any capital gains that are evaluated for the trust assets. So if you have, say, like you put your business in the trust, and it's making money. that if you live in a state that has income tax, because every state is different, whatever, whether or not it's taxed based on the grantor, the person who created the trust, or the beneficiary, the person who's getting the assets in the trust, the distribution, that would also be determined by the type of trust and the rules of the trust. But that would be something that you're looking at if there's supposed to be distributions yearly. If you're buying and selling, whatever fees are associated with that process in general, those are things that maintenance fees that you would have to worry about. If you have a trustee that is, say, a trust company, paying your trustee. Most individuals usually they don't hire, they would use like a trusted family member to be the trustee. But then that trustee may have to hire individuals to help them manage because they don't have the financial background or the investment background to say what should be done with the assets that are owned by this trust.
Got it.
So those are things that you have to consider. The startup fees depends on the firm that you go with. Shameless plug. We work with you here at AM Law Group. So if you want to.
Exactly. And all the information is going to be down below. And these are the guys that I usually work with. I want to say like 90% of my deals, I go to them whenever I'm closing a property or anything like that. As you know, New York is a lawyer state. So in order for you to make a purchase of a house, you have to have lawyers involved. And these are some of the best people that I've ever worked with. I'm sorry.
No. Keep going.
I just plugged you too.
Absolutely.
No worries.
No worries.
So like, also with that too, I know you said it's irrevocable, right? Trust, and what's the other one?
Revocable.
And a revocable trust. With the revocable trust, are there fees in order to make these changes as well, or how does that work?
So again, that depends from firm to firm that you go with. For us at AM Law Group, again, depending on how significant the change is, because if you have a minor change, name change of something, that may not cost anything. But if we're redoing the document over because you're changing beneficiaries completely, or you're adding assets like doing a deed transfer, there's a cost for that. Any transferring, you bought a property and now you want to put it in this trust, that transfer tax, all of the fees that are associated with that deed transfer would be part of the fees that you're incurring.
You also mentioned that you're able to put business in trust and kind of like houses and all different assets in trust. Do you recommend, like, if someone has a business and they have a personal property, or even if they have an investment property, do they separate those into different trusts, or does it really matter?
It would depend on. The legal answer is always it depends.
Of course.
But it depends. First, what is your goal for setting up the trust? Are you looking to for asset protection? You want to protect these assets from being open to creditors being able to sue or anything like that. That's the first thing that you want to consider. The next would be whether or not the control that we spoke about. Do you want to keep, having control over the assets that you're putting in this trust? So that would determine whether or not, I may need, along with that, would be also what is the value of your estate in general?
Okay.
Are you looking at, you have couple $1 million policies here of life insurance that will push you over that exemption allowance and put you in that tax bracket that has you paying 40% when you die. If that's the case, then you do want to have different trusts for different purposes. Different types of trusts serve different purposes. So I've had clients where they, had an extensive life insurance policy, so they set up an irrevocable trust solely for that. But they still wanted to maintain control over the assets in a revocable trust for over their properties that they were looking to refinance, or that they weren't sure if they wanted to sell or keep or not. And they still wanted to have that control. So they would have more than one type of trust for different reasons. If your main concern is just making sure that your loved ones are avoiding probate, then you can go the route of having just one trust where you're passing everything, making sure everything is passed along according to what you want.
Okay.
So, yeah, it depends.
It depends. That's always the answer. So, I have a lot of clients who are investors, and the way that they kind of structure their business is they'll do different LLCs for different homes that they purchase, whether it's residential or commercial. They'll put it on an individual LLC. How does that relationship work with the LLC and the trust? Can they put multiple LLCs into one trust, or what would you? It depends, but what would you recommend?
Absolutely. So the recommendation is always to put, if you have multiple investment properties, each investment property should be put in its own LLC, and then you can put all the LLCs into your trust. You can even go a step further if you had like a revocable versus an irrevocable trust.
Okay.
If you wanted still to have some protection, then you can have that adding an extra layer between the trust, whatever other assets are in the trust, and those LLCs by having a holding company. So you can create the trust, create a holding company under the trust, and then that holding company has all of these other companies that each have individual properties in them.
Got it. Is that similar to a corporation or totally different?
Similar, yes. Very much similar in terms of how it's set up, but the trust is owning everything. Right.
Definitely. And like, and this is the part that most people don't want to talk about, but how does everything happen after you pass away? Like, what's that procedure looks like?
So, again, depends. What did you set up in your trust? What did your trust say? Does it tell you that upon my death, my children get everything equally? Then that would be for your trustee to now manage until, if you say you have a child that's underage and you have a child that's in college, then you have a child that's fully grown, wife and kids or whatever, and you may have structured your trust in a way that says, I want to wait to disperse this entire trust when that youngest one is of age before everyone gets to split whatever is left in the trust equally. If that's the case, the trustee's managing the trust still. The person that you've put in place after you've passed, they're managing the assets that are in there to ensure that there's still a trust fund to disperse once that condition has been met, which would be the youngest child reaching age of majority.
Got it. So can sometimes, so it seems like sometimes, like if you have multiple kids, it feels like there has to be a condition in order to trigger certain things in the trust, or it just depends on whether you do the revocable or the irrevocable.
Not even that. It depends on what your concerns are. So you want this trust to grow the assets that are in there while this youngest one is still, underage, to give the whether it's so that it can continue to take care of that child in your absence, or if you feel that, give it some time to grow before you're giving them everything, because once they have control over whatever you give them, you no longer have any say-so. So the trust is like you can manage what's happening with the assets in the trust by what you've put in there to say, I want this to happen at this time. This trigger event has to happen before they get any kind of money, or they have to achieve certain accomplishments before they get any kind of access to the assets that are in the trust. Once those things are satisfied and they are able to receive their distribution, you no longer have any say-so over what they do.
So I've been watching Power, right? Power is almost over. And then it was Power Book 2, and I think whatchamacallit had a trust. How real is that? Or is that just like made for TV where like you can say you have to graduate college in order to...
That's exactly what I'm saying, is that you can say down to the T when and where they should get this asset. So what happens to the asset if he doesn't fulfill that criteria? Does the government just gets that, or? So the trust, the provisions that are put in the trust, and if it's written well based on what, because other people have been watching Power too, so if it's written well based on what you want, it will have a alternatives for if this does not happen, what then? So that is part of what you're also outlining in this trust. If they say they never fulfill this requirement, the trust can go on for as long as it's allowed to go on, because there's also what we call rules against perpetuities that also maximizes how long a trust can last. That may come into effect, or if there's nothing left in the trust for the trust to continue. So say the trustee's been managing as best as they can, but the economy is terrible, and so they've had to pay whatever issues that whatever assets you started out with are no longer available, then the trust has to be dissolved. Got it. So that it may be something else that causes this to the person never to receive that distribution.
Okay.
But there's always usually some sort of
Provision
put in place for an alternative.
Okay. Let's say someone passes away, right? I'm guessing there's provision, and they purchase a house. Of course, we have property taxes and all kinds of things, maintenance, all kinds of maintenance costs. How does that get distributed? Is there something set aside saying, hey, based upon how the economy is going, we know that property tax is going to be this much and this much. We're going to allocate this amount of funds to pay for these things, or how does that work?
So really savvy people will have those put in place. They'll say, you know what, I see the way that the economy is going. I want there to be something left in this trust by the time my grandkids get older. So
Got it.
I want this investment to happen. I want, and the trustees given a little bit of direction as to how do you make this trust stay afloat in the wake of, say, the economy going down. Once the grantor has passed, taking advantage of that is where the trustee is supposed to, hire investment advisors if they need to, or speak to accountants to say, okay, this is what we have in here. What do I need to do to keep this going? And if once the person is gone and you're looking to if there's, like I was saying before, if there's nothing left in the trust, it
has to be dissolved. Okay. And then who makes that decision? Or it just depends on who makes that decision of saying, hey, this is no longer viable. We need to dissolve this.
Depending on what the provisions in the trust say, most typically it's usually an independent trustee, which is a person who's not related to anybody in the trust. That's a beneficiary of the trust. They're coming in and saying, okay, this trust is not fruitful. You have to disperse of whatever is left in it and dissolve it. So there's an independent party can come in and make that determination. Could be a court appointed. Could be that the beneficiaries come together and say, hey, we need to appoint someone to look this over and see can this survive.
And do you guys recommend someone to help manage the trust, or do you guys manage it in-house? How does that work?
In terms of
the
firm?
Yes.
So no, our part mainly is to draft this.
Okay.
Draft it as best as possible for based on what you want, what you intend to achieve, and what your future goals are. Once the drafting has been done, you can hire us for the separate job of managing it, but that's not they're not one and the same.
Yes.
You have your trustee, whether that be an individual, a family friend, someone or a trust company or a bank.
Okay. So there are companies that just handle managing trust. Yes. So let's say if you're a business person and this is just outside of your scope, you just want to make sure that everything done properly, you can just hire a company.
Absolutely.
That's great information. And do you guys have recommendations for certain companies, or you haven't gotten there yet?
I haven't gotten there yet.
No worries.
There are a few that I have been in contact with, but not that I can remember off the top of my head to recommend. But I will definitely start working on that list, because oftentimes people do have that question, especially if you're not necessarily financially savvy and you don't know much about what that you want this trust, but you don't know how it operates. It is a good thing to do, is to hire somebody who can manage it for you instead.
Is there a point where, even if you have an asset, that it doesn't make sense to put it into a trust?
Yeah, there are alternate ways around distributing your assets after you pass, outside of just a trust and a probate. So you have things like in a situation with your property, if you wanted to maintain some right, but wanted to pass to a specific one of your children, you could create a life estate deed. That is where you're still owner during this time, but once your lifetime is over, it automatically passes to your children. So that is it. If you don't have significant amount of assets, it may not be worthwhile.
Yeah.
It's where you have multiple properties. You have don't get me wrong, there's still always need for planning, whether or not it's going to be a trust or just a will or power of attorney or a healthcare proxy. You still need to have a plan put in place, because once you do not have capacity, it's very difficult for things to go according to how you would want it to happen. I've seen it too many times where, everyone's like, oh, I don't, what do I need a will for? I don't have anything. But then you get sick and you no one is able to have the power to manage even what you have, what the little that you do have, because there was no plan put in place for that in the beginning. So if you don't have significant amount of assets, it's not necessarily the best financial decision to create a trust, because it can, you can start anywhere from like 5,000 and upwards of that for creating a trust, and that's not necessary for everyone. But if you have significant amount of assets that you do want to avoid that probate process, I absolutely encourage you to create a trust.
What's the craziest thing you've seen somebody put into a trust?
It wasn't what they put in terms of like an asset per se, but it was actually
Tell the story. What?
I've seen, it was more so the detail as to what they wanted to happen with their burial, that like down to what they should be wearing, who should be playing the piano, and you can get as detailed as you want as to what should happen, even with your remains. But it was very, very thorough, and I was just amazed as to how intense this person was. Just like, I want to make sure that these are the people that are carrying my body into the
So she had it down to who was carrying, well, they, I don't know if it's he or is she, I don't want to generalize and say that no way this could have been a guy, but hey.
Absolutely.
But so also with that as well, is there any crazy stories that you had that, anything went awry once it's kind of like a will, like how you hear all the crazy stories about the reading of the will. Is there any crazy stories with the trust world, or?
Well,
you can say no, Itashwa, mind your business too.
I have to think about that one a little bit more. Not that I can think of off the top of my head right now. I guess back to your original question, one of the craziest things is seeing like someone put thousands. It might have been more than thousands, like a couple thousands of collector doll, like the
little tchotchkes.
Yeah, and when I saw the pictures of them, I didn't believe that there were really people who collect things like
those
this.
things are valuable. Some of those, depending on the person,
they like had their own house for these tchotchkes, basically. And I was just like, wow, this is intense. Where do you go to get all of this stuff, to accumulate all of this?
Someone that I know is a big American doll collector. And I was surprised they decided to sell their collection, how much money they made from those little things. So even things like that can go into a trust as well. Awesome. Is there anything that I'm missing that you wanted to that everyone should know when they're planning? Because like you said, a trust may not necessarily work for you. How would you figure out what's the best thing for your situation?
I think the first step would be evaluating what you do know that you have. So, taking account of, okay, what is my estate worth at this moment? Do I actually own things? Do I not own things?
Yeah.
What are your plans for the future? Do you want to purchase? And when you do, if something were to happen to you, what do you want to happen? Like having those questions in the back of your mind as you're moving forward with, growing your estate, collecting assets, whatever it is that you want to do, thinking about, well, if I can't take care of this anymore, who do I want to take care of it? And then who do I want to ultimately have it? Okay.
And then I think one more question. When they structure it, I know you say, when we first started the conversation, you said that it's no longer yours. Is this no longer part of your wealth? I hope I'm phrasing it well. In terms of, is it an individual tax? Because like when we think about Medicare, Medicaid, and everything like that, how does that affect those kind of benefits for our elderly couple?
Great question.
For our elderly people, sorry.
Absolutely. So there are what we call Medicaid trusts that are set up specifically for their purpose. So in New York, you have what's called a 5-year look back for Medicaid. When you're looking to apply, they're looking back at least 5 years to see what was your income. If you own a house, that is considered income. If you have whatever assets that you have that you own, they are looking within that 5-year period. Even if you're transferring those assets to, say, an irrevocable trust, which takes it out of your estate and you no longer own it, so it wouldn't be counted as your income, they're looking at if that transfer happened within the last 5 years. So even if you say you want, today you decided I'm going to create this irrevocable trust, put my house in it, just so that I can qualify for Medicaid, you have to wait at least 5 years because they're still looking at that transfer as saying, well, what happened to that money? You had that money was yours. So it is counted towards you as income.
Got it. So young people, get it in your trust now so that when we get old, we can get Medicare, Medicaid. I don't know if it's still going to be around when we get old, but
That's
still.
True. One thing that I do encourage for younger clients is to look into long-term care.
Okay.
So you don't have to, worry about long-term care insurance in terms of,
Tell us
paying
about
into
that.
something that'll take care, will be will replace the need for Medicaid. If you have, I've had a couple of clients that have had long-term care insurance, so they had no concern about whether or not they would qualify for Medicaid later on.
And how does someone go about getting that? This is not your wheelhouse. Itashwa, stop trying to get what you call it. Google is our friend.
Yes.
No worries. But that's another tidbit, and that's one of the benefits that has someone of your experience and your caliber on this show is to give people different options and different avenues. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch base on? Did I miss anything?
Did we miss anything? Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, because I'm good at what I do.
You really are.
No worries.
Along with if you don't have a trust, at least have some. If you don't have a need for a trust, at least putting something in place, whether it be a will, having your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy. These are also things that you have to revisit at least every couple of years. If your situation changes, you shouldn't.
Do they work in tandem, like the will and the trust, or do you not have to have one if you have the other? Or
so even with all the trusts that we create, we always still create a pour over will, which says that if for any chance that I didn't get a chance to transfer all of my assets to my trust or something that is not, allowed to go in the trust for whatever reason, and it's still governed by this will, I want the will to mimic my trust. So it's called the pour over will. I'm pouring whatever assets that are governed by this will into my trust. So I've already made provisions in my trust as to who gets what, when they get it, how they get it, all of that. My will is just supposed to follow that.
Awesome. This has been amazing. I want you to thank you again for coming out. And we're going to have all your contact information in the description as well as on the screen. Also, are you accessible on social media? Do you prefer to be contact versus email? What's the best way?
Email is the best way. Trust@amgroupllp.com.
We'll get you. We'll definitely get you. Again, this is Itashwa Watkins, your favorite realtor, and I am happy to have you guys. Thank you so much. I'm out of here. Peace.